Okay. It looks like we are live. How is everyone today? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Jason Levine. And for today's Back from NAB live stream, we're going to be talking about some After Effects, specifically the newly released content-aware fill. This was something that I was privileged enough to be able to showcase last October at Adobe Max in Los Angeles, and it was just released in After Effects just a couple of weeks ago during the NAB show in Las Vegas. So I thought I would take this opportunity today, very briefly, just to show you a couple of additional examples. We covered a lot of this in a live stream that we did then, but this way you can see some additional footage, some additional examples, and a couple little tips and things that I've kind of refined and learned along the way that I'll pass on to you when you're trying to use this. What's up, Dominic? What's up, Waif and Orin? All right. Wafei Chan, Shoaib, Pasha, Hugo. How are you doing? All right. Let's bounce over here. All right. How's it going, Tari? Pretty. Ahmed, how are you? Ahmed from Egypt. Very nice to see you. All right. Tari from Bangladesh. Nice. What's up, Michelle Galina? Sweet. Cornelius, Alex. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started. And for those of you joining on Twitter Periscope as well as on Facebook and YouTube, of course, you'll be able to watch the archives of this right after we finish. Marianne, how's it going? Yeah, this is so cool. And again, you can watch the replay. If you want to see everything that was released for the April updates to Premiere Pro, After Effects, Audition, and Character Animator, you can check out on all three of these properties my replay there. It's about 90 minutes or so, but it covers all the applications and pretty much everything that we added there. All right. Cool. All right, so let's go ahead and switch over. And we'll save questions until the end so I can kind of just get to all the stuff that I want to show you today. So specifically for this, I decided to... Oh, and my interface changed again. Blargle gargle. Let's see if this goes back. There we go. Okay, that should be... Hold on. I'm sorry. I'm just very particular now if the layout isn't exactly the way I want it. Okay, good. Hello from Turkey. I wanted to shoot just some footage just today, just to really show you that, hey, this is kind of rough and raw, showing you what you can do quickly. Now, just a little history here, of course. If you know content-aware fill from Photoshop, we've had it for years and years. This functions in a very similar way. And as a result of that, when trying to remove or replace objects or smooth out things that you're trying to, somehow change inside of your image, inside of your video, you have to think in the same kind of way that you would for an image, obviously, right? So there's certain things where you're going to potentially do a little bit more playing around or tweaking to get it just right. And fortunately, we've done some really cool stuff with content-aware fill that actually allows you to use something called a reference frame when the algorithm is having trouble replacing or filling in the background. And there's three specific methods for the fill that it uses. So there's the object method, fairly self-explanatory there. If you have an object in your video that you're trying to remove or eliminate, that's typically the method you're going to use for that. Then we have the surface method. Now, this is particularly useful, and this can go either way. By the way, a combination of all of these can work in the same footage sometimes. You just have to play around with it. That's the nice thing, is that your results are not necessarily always going to be the same, even on the same masked sections. So it's worth trying and, again, kind of getting familiar with how these things work. But surface is particularly good if you're trying to remove something where the background or whatever it's sitting over top of is never revealed. So if you think of something like a picture on a wall, or in the case of the example that I'll show you two, one that I just tried, it didn't quite work as well, but I know how I'd fix it later. But I'll show you another one where there's some shadows on the ground and the camera's moving, but the shadows never move. Perfect example. They never reveal the grass underneath without the shadow, but the algorithm is intelligent enough using this method to figure out what should be there. And then there's edge blend, and that's the first one that we're going to focus on here. And this is probably, and this is why I just shot this little piece of footage right here, one of the most common uses for and very quickly eliminating unwanted logos and things. If you didn't pay for the product placement, you got to take that Apple off of that laptop, right? So this is a great method for removing that stuff quickly. Now, of course, one of the new features in Premiere is a new enhanced masking and tracking, which is infinitely faster. So, if this were like broadcast TV, we could just quickly mask the Apple here and blur it, right? And then track it as the camera moves, whatever, and it's blurred. That's fine. That's enough for broadcast TV. And you often see in TV shows where if they don't even do that, or they haven't sort of sent frames to Photoshop in the past to paint it out, sometimes they just cover it over with a sticker or something like that, right? You've seen all the other methods. This method works incredibly well, and it's super easy to do. And yeah, it'll just kind of impress you. So we're going to cover all three of these. Now, along the way, I'll talk about a couple little tips and tricks that I've kind of learned along the way, and a couple things that some customers have mentioned that they've run into, which are just worth noting in case you encounter any of these issues. Okay, so if we just take a look at this raw piece of footage here, literally just filmed a couple of minutes ago with my iPhone. Also want to point out that not only is it shot with the iPhone, but it's not, particularly stabilized or anything like that. You can even see that it looks like in the video, because I didn't have focus lock on, that the aperture is changing, so you're getting like slight little flicker in there. But this is all the point, right? This is not finessed, perfectly lit content. This is just something that I want to put up on YouTube or put somewhere, and I have to get rid of that Apple logo. So how do I do that? So we're actually going to do this whole process right now, and then the other two, I'll kind of just go through some of the steps, all right? So in the case of this, and hold on, let me just switch back over here. In the case of this, the first thing you need to do is mask. You need to create the hole. And this is just like in Photoshop. So this would be super easy, right? In Photoshop, we would take our lasso tool, select the Apple, shift function F5, and content aware fill, and boom, done, right? Easy, simple. It knows exactly what to do. It even has that color blend checkbox inside of the content aware fill dialog. So for the case of this, that's effectively what Edge Blend does, is that rather than try and remove the logo, where again, it's looking for something to replace it with, we're saying, yes, take this logo out, but blend the edges of the pixels, because this is sort of flat color. This is consistent, even though, of course, with the light and the camera move, it's slightly changing. That's why this method works so well, specifically designed for something like that. Think of it as logo removal. We showed some examples on the stream before of taking a logo off of a motorcycle. Same concept here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to my various tools, and you can use any tool in After Effects for masking to create this mask for content aware. So you can use all of these, the classic rectangle, ellipse, polygon. You can use the pen tool, which I'll show you in a moment if you want to do your own sort of freeform mask, or you can use the roto brush. So whatever method you decide, any one of those can be leveraged here. So I'm simply going to use the ellipse for this. I think that'll kind of do what we need to do. All right, and come over here and create our little mask like that. Now, Marianne is asking, why would I need to remove the logo? So again, like if I'm in television or in movies for that matter, and I didn't pay Apple, you see this in television shows, and I mean like broadcast TV. Sometimes you even see it in Netflix too. If they didn't pay to use the Apple logo to be seen on screen, you can't show it. You have to blur it, you have to mask it, you have to cover it up somehow. So this is super common. And again, in like news and broadcast, they do this all the time, covering up logos, covering up names, any number of things you can do here. So this is just an idea, just an example, all right? So we create the mask. And once you do that, again, we can refine the mask here. Maybe I'll just move this, move it around just a little bit here. It's a little big, but that's okay, it should be fine. If I twirl down our mask options, I might want to expand this ever so slightly, because there is kind of this slight little parallaxing thing as I'm tilting the camera, the logo gets a little bigger, so I want to make sure it stays within that mask. And now the next step is to track it. So if I come over to the classic After Effects tracker, and yes, Marianne, copyright, exactly. I'm just simply going to click on Track Selected Mask Forward, and now it's going to do its thing. Now, I'm actually doing this for you here lives, you can kind of see this whole process. Also worth pointing out, as you can see, as it's doing that, this is another piece of footage up here, but they're all the same. This is in fact 4K shot on the iPhone. So you're going to see the 4K track, the 4K mask and track rather, and the 4K fill process. The time and the render time and the process time will vary, okay? But the alternative, of course, would be to export a frame sequence of this, send it over to Photoshop, and then paint out each one of those frames of the logo, and then send it back to After Effects. Now, that in and of itself is fine, but what's going to take you more time? And of course, as lighting and other things change, sometimes painting it in and doing it old school could theoretically take even more time, all right? It just sort of depends. So again, lots of different ways to do things in After Effects. This is just one of the many, all right? So now we've got our mask. What I'm going to do down here is, instead of add, we're going to go to subtract. So now you can see, now we have the hole. There's the hole that we just punched through. And this is what you need to do. This is your first step with content-aware fill, is you need to create that hole. So once you do that, now After Effects is going to perform all the magic here. So we're going to come over to content-aware fill. By the way, if you don't see this panel already docked, if you go up to the window menu, you'll find it here. So content-aware fill, just below character and above effects and presets. Make sure that we're in the edge blend mode here. Range is going to be our work area, and I'm simply going to click on Generate Fill Layer. And now it's going to go through and it's going to compare all of those pixels before and after as it begins moving through. Oh, and you can see here, sorry, my panel's not quite big enough. It's already analyzed everything. Wow, that was amazingly fast. I didn't expect it to analyze so quickly. Edge blend tends to be pretty fast in terms of its analysis, by the way. You can see it's rendering out the frames. So again, you might say to yourself, well, if I'm in Photoshop, and this is, incidentally, it's 120 frames, okay? So how long would it take you to, one, just open up in focus each of those 120 frames, select, fill, do whatever you want to do. Marianne said we can put a photo of a real apple in there. Yes, technically you could, because that wouldn't be Apple's logo. You know, we'll leave the copyright infringement issues. That's on you. All right, you gotta pay attention to that stuff if you're going to be doing things for real. Done. I didn't even have enough time to finish that thought. So let's click away and click play. What? Yes, that's it. That's how easy that is. Edge blend. Even as the lighting changes. Even as the lighting changes, you can see. And also, again, this is just natural light. You know, I don't even know what the bit rate of these HEVC files are. They can look amazing, but when it's indoors and not properly lit, I mean, you can see there's, you know, the sunlight here. This is a bit overblown right there. No shadow detail over here. So exposure-wise, this is not brilliant. This is just the default setting, and we got rid of it. And we can turn this off, of course. There's our hole, right? We can twirl this down. This is our uninterrupted preview function, right? So there it is before, right? As it was. And there it is with our fill that we just did in 4K live on stream. All right. So that's the basics. That's the basic method for using something like Edge Blend, but that's the basic concept of how this works for removing things in your video. Create a mask. I keep hitting this bottle. Create a mask, track the mask. Now, by the way, the tracker in this case, because this was not moving, it was only changing in size ever so slightly. Vera, where'd the logo? Yes, exactly, it's gone. Sometimes, you know, the tracker, you may have to modify some of those keyframes. You may have to do a lot of manual movement or adjustment to the keyframes of the tracker. That's the tracker. That's nothing to do with content-aware fill. That's just playing with the tracker and you know, getting better at adjusting it and using some of its different settings, etc. That's no different than working in After Effects without even using this effect, okay? So mask it, track it, fill it. That's it, all right? Yes, and if we wanted to now, we could take those tracking points and replace that area with a real apple, or even better, the apple from the Beatles' Apple records, okay? So that's it, done, simple, okay? So that's using the edge blend method with just a standard ellipse mask. So let's go to another example here oh, sorry, this one. So this is the before. And in this particular one, I wanted to have kind of a clean plate removing this this candle. So let me go ahead and play this back for you. Again, just you can see the same table where I just shot the laptop there. Okay. Now, when I was doing this before, it didn't occur to me. So you're seeing there, if you look at the top of the cover of the candle here, it's reflective. You're seeing one of the blades of a ceiling fan that's way above it there. So I didn't think that was going to be too much of an issue, but I thought, well, okay, so maybe for this, maybe I can get away with edge blend, because really I want to take this out. Yes, it is an object, but I kind of want it to just blend the edges of this background. So without thinking any further than that, and again, when you decide on your fill method, you have to think about what's the best way to do this. What's going to make sense? So I thought, oh, well, I'll try edge blend, because I'm going to take this thing out and then I want to blend all of these sort of silvery, non-specifically shaped pixels around it, okay? So I did that. And let me go ahead and turn on the original here. And what you'll see is that when I did that with my basic mask, it kind of created this weird smeary sort of thing. And on top of that, because it wasn't removing an object, it was blending pixels inside of it because there was movement inside of that object. There's that fan right there. So you're seeing kind of this weird spill of the fan, okay? Oh, and in fact, this one was a surface removal. I thought this might be good for surface because it's sort of like the picture on the wall. It's never moving. Its shadow isn't moving. Probably pretty good. But there was movement in that reflection, and that just didn't work. Maybe if that movement in the reflection wasn't there, it would have been okay. I could have used some color correction. You're seeing a little bit of weird edging there. It wasn't ideal. All right. So then I thought, okay, well, maybe for this we need to use a reference frame. All right. So what is the reference frame? Well, the reason for using the reference frame is that in the case of this, because we never reveal what's behind it, specifically I kind of wanted this grayish silver look of the tray. One, it didn't know what hues, what colors are underneath, because the shadow is kind of yellow, right? The shadow is warm. Also, based on the mask that I created, which was not particularly excellent, there's my mask. And if you look down at my settings here, you can see that I've expanded it about 9 pixels, and I've added a bunch of feathering because I thought, oh, yeah, well, again, I want to I want to blend those surface pixels together. I probably should have gone all the way into the shadows because again, with this mask alone, it just wasn't enough. So instead, what I decided to do was send this to Photoshop and paint in the way that this should look. So this is called using the reference frame. If the algorithm doesn't quite know what to fill in that background with, you can manually paint it in Photoshop, and then it will use that frame as the reference to fill in your masked area. This is absolute craziness. So that's what I did. So I'm going to show you exactly how this works. So let's go ahead and say create reference frame. All right, I'm going to leave this on surface method for now because ultimately I wound up changing the method as well. So here we are now in Photoshop, okay? So we're in Photoshop. Here's my hole. Now I got to paint in the hole. All right, 2 things to keep in mind. Now this is something that came up with a user, but more importantly, this is something which may affect many of you in the video space because we are constantly dealing with various color spaces, right? And specifically where After Effects and Photoshop are concerned, you have a lot of control over your color working space, right? Okay, now we're going to come back to that in a second. First, let's talk about painting in the reference layer. Something to keep in mind here is that the purpose of this is for you to fill in that hole the way that it's supposed to look. It doesn't serve a purpose to treat the entire image, the entire frame, because the fill is only happening in that mask section. Remember, After Effects is still going to know where that mask is. It's just going to use whatever you paint in there as the reference. So here's what I wanted to do. First of all, I tried using content aware fill on this. Doing it one time didn't work. I was getting, in fact, here, let me see. We'll try it and we'll see what happens. Again, you don't always get the same result with this. I just thought, okay, let's do like a single pass of content aware on that hole. Maybe it'll work this time. Again, we've got the color adaptation. Click OK. And that worked better than the last time. Okay, it's not bad. There's some slight weird edging right here. So maybe we'll fix this. I wanted to be sure it preserved the edges right up here, which the first time I did this, it did not work. So again, Shift Function F5. Let's fix that. All right, and I don't love these kind of darker hues. They're looking kind of weird. So this took me a couple minutes to kind of get the color right. All right. Now you might be saying to yourself, why aren't you modifying the sides here where it's all yellow? Well, because again, that's not inside the masked area. If I wanted to paint that in properly with all of this silver, splotchy, metallic look, the whole mask should have been all of that, okay? So that's something to keep in mind. Now, with the same mask, I'll show you what I wound up doing to fix that weird color anyway. Just a simple trick with an adjustment layer in After Effects. But keep that in mind, okay? When you send a reference frame, you're painting in the whole. Don't start treating, oh, I want to fix something over here and take out this splotch and these little white dots, because those are not going to be used. And if anything, it may do something even more bizarre in terms of what the fill is trying to achieve. So it's really about that selected masked area, okay? Now, we were talking about color working spaces. So when you do this, and let's say that this is good right now. Okay, we like the way this looks. And actually, this is fine. This actually, it doesn't even look like shadows. It looks like a stained tray. No one would know. It doesn't look like it was the shadow from something. I don't even know where these things came from. All right? They were already in there. And that's probably just poor exposure and color temperature via the iPhone because it was kind of slightly reflective. So I'm going to save this. All right? And when I go back to After Effects, now, just as I said, look at what's happened. So if we twirl down to the bottom, you will now see, and I want to make sure you can see it, that it has created a reference frame layer all the way at the bottom of the layer stack inside of the composition panel, okay? So, the timeline. And you can see the masked area, all right? So at this point, what I did is I then ran, and here I just turned off the mask. So, okay, there it is, just as we had it in Photoshop. And I reran this again. Problem this time is that I had no alpha expansion, right? Just to kind of expand again the edges. So when I played this one back, let's see. Yeah. See, again, it didn't quite know what to do, and we were still getting some weird, you see that movement happening right there? And it was still trying to interpret some of that yellow from other places. And again, the camera's changing, the light is changing as the camera moves. It just didn't do it. So what was the problem? Well, the problem was I was using the wrong method. This was an object that I was trying to remove. So we needed to remove with the object method, okay? Taking out the object. So I tracked it, which you can see here. All right, so here's our mask and all the tracking points. All right. Just like that. Okay. Selected object and then generated that fill layer. All right. And just to kind of show you the final here, now you'll notice up at the top here, I've got this adjustment layer. On this adjustment layer, I created another mask, all right, around the area here, subtracted and inverted. And then for that masked area, I added a little bit of lumetry. And in this case, what was I doing with lumetry here? I think I just did it in the basic corrections. So I adjusted the temperature a bit cooler down to around -57, right? Like this. And desaturated to around 5% as opposed to 100% saturation here. All right. And that gave us a little bit of color correction right there. All right. So here was the final version with the adjustment layer using the object method. Now you can see as I'm constantly trying to move the camera to see where does it fall apart. It got a little weird in the last like 2 or 3 frames. If you look real closely, where is it? It's like right. Maybe it's an illusion. I think it's just an illusion. My eye was just, it looked like there was just some movement in that masked selected area. I think it's just the illusion of the camera moving. And I probably could have lightened that area even more, all right? But if you take a look at the fill, I mean, it's seamless, right? It's really seamless. Now, again, I would probably come in here and just maybe do another little mask on this and just desaturate a bit more, or just adjust the black level in this case, just to make it more silver, all right? But really quickly managed to get it looking like this, okay? Super cool, all right? Shot with the iPhone, noisy. I don't know if that's coming over the stream, but there's an enormous amount of like pixel mess, just a lot of noise, a lot of color noise. You know, this is not raw 444 media by any stretch, okay? All right. So again, object removal, edge blend. So let's talk about surface removal. So here's an example, and I'll show you one that I shot too. I didn't quite nail it before the stream, but I think you'll get the idea. Drone shot, obviously, shot from above. This was from a film called The Scene Between, directed by Brian Rawlis. We showcased this last year. And what we wanted to do in this case was to remove those tree shadows or cloud shadows, something above that's creating these shadows that you see here. All right. Now, one of the things about using content aware, you can do multiple masks simultaneously for something like this. Because there's two separate instances, we created two separate masks and filled them separately. So you can see here we've got the top mask, all right, created on this piece of footage right there. Now, something to keep in mind if we wind this back, talking about alpha expansion. Again, if you've ever used content aware on stills, you know that if you're making a selection around something and it's very close to some other object or some other differently colored pixel in the frame, sometimes it will attempt to pull pixel data from adjacent sections, right? It makes sense, right? It says, oh, okay, well, we got to fill in this whole section. Maybe this thing should be extended into this area here. Well, similarly, this is what happened when I used object with some alpha expansion. So for this particular one, we want to switch this to surface because, again, these shadows never move. These are not objects, right? Think of it, it's the picture on the wall that never reveals what's behind it, which in this case would be, you know, lighter greener grass and lighter brown dirt, right? We never show what that actually is, so it has to guess. So surface method, alpha expansion of 0, and then you click on generate fill layer. So here, why don't I go ahead and I'll just try this one. This should be pretty fast. All right, let's give it a shot. Let's make sure I've got everything on. Okay, just for this first one, for the top mask. All right, it's analyzing. Okay, let you see what it's doing there. Okay. Going pretty quickly. Rendering this out. This is 88 frames. So once again, I keep saying, like, how long would this take you in Photoshop? And now, right now, am I seeing this in, it is full. Okay, it's at 50%. Okay, and I'm zoomed in here. What? There's no weirdness, there's no noise, there's no seam. I mean, it looks pretty sweet. Now, could I have used a reference frame there and painted it in from somewhere else? Sure, totally. Could that have worked even better with the surface method? Yeah, potentially. So again, you always have this option. And by the way, you can create reference frames at like the beginning and the end. Maybe there's some other movement or change in the camera that's throwing off that original reference. You can use multiple reference frames at different points in time on different objects in your scene, right? And if you start pre-composing things, it can get very complex, but it works quickly. I mean, 88 frames. No way I could have painted that out, cloned it, or content aware filled 88 frames in Photoshop with that result in, 39 seconds or however long that was, okay? And you can see I've already done the bottom fill here. Again, here was the bottom mask. Okay, there's the bottom fill. And, again, if we never saw that before, you wouldn't think, oh, that looks like a strange patch of grass. Now, this one does have, as I look at it now, it's got a little bit more of an edge. Now, for this one, in fact, here, let's try that. Let's give it a shot since we're live. Why not? Let's take that bottom fill off. For this bottom mask, I'm going to expand it just a little. And let's use a little bit of alpha expansion here. And let's see how that works and generate the fill. Just kind of smooth out the edges. In the case of this particular one, if it still doesn't look quite right to me, perfect opportunity to use the reference frame, right? Paint that one frame, fill in that one little grassy area, and that'll knock it out. Oh, wow. Okay. Now I'm just looking at the first frame so far. It's still rendering, but already that first frame looks better. Can you see? It doesn't have that real specific, wow, it even kind of created its own little, and now as I'm looking at it, I can't even see where it was. Wow, that's way better. Look at that. Oh my gosh. When the host is impressed with himself. There's no seam, there's no cutout, it just looks like a patch of grass. You'd never know. And even looking at it now, if I look for that first one, I can't even quite see where the first one was. Okay? So, again, because there was nothing in and around the selection here, a little bit of that alpha expansion and a slight expansion of the mask down below allowed it to sample more pixels and give us a smoother, better result. Why not feathering, you ask? Well, feathering can work in many cases. Here, because we're looking at sort of grass, it's very textured, and we don't want it to appear soft, right? If you've got too much feathering, perhaps around the edges here, it's going to soften that hole that you created, and it would just look fake. So that's why I didn't have any feathering on this particular selection. With others, sometimes the feather is really necessary. In the case of this particular surface blend that I did here. Now, this one, here's what the original looked like. Let me just show you. So I've got this framed picture. This is in the studio right here, if the lighting looks familiar to you. All right. And I wanted to take this out. So again, this was just shot moments ago. You can see, the studio is dark here. So this is, the worst possible footage, right? Because look at how noisy it is. There's so much, there's banding, it's just, I'm making this algorithm work way too hard. But I did this on purpose to kind of showcase, hey, it's really easy. Now, even in the case of this mask, I used the rectangular mask. Also kind of an odd choice because, yes, that is a rectangle, but I didn't even shape it appropriately. I mean, it's sort of, right, it's sort of skewed. So I've tried this with another example with this kind of perspective. Drawing the mask in the proper perspective gives you a better result. This gave me kind of this weird sort of fill. But this was another example where when I did the original pass on this, with no reference frame, it was okay, but you can see because there's so much noise in this shot, I'm showing you inside the masked area there, like it filled it in with some weird shadow, and there's just all kinds of just gross nastiness right there. So the first step here was to add in the reference frame, which I did. Okay, and that was the reference frame right there. All right, and the reference frame, and just here, there's the masked area. There's the reference frame. Reference frame isn't particularly brilliant either. I mean, even Photoshop, it didn't quite know what to do here. I used a combination of content aware and then a little bit of patch tool, and I didn't create this little wavy line. It pulled this and simulated this from somewhere here. You're getting these little silhouettes of some of the soundproofing. So I just thought, okay, well, again, if I didn't know what was there, it just looks like, I'm just realizing now that this kind of looks like a butt. Okay. It just kind of pulled this seeing similar curved pixels, right? Again, this is more about a proof of concept here. But here is what my final filled version looked like. It's not great. It's not perfect. Again, because this shot was so noisy, it really was getting a lot of noise in the output here. So if this were better lit, I'd have a better result. Additionally, a slightly better mask would have done the job, and maybe a better reference frame. Ultimately, if I were going to try and fill in something like this shot, which is already in such low quality, it would behoove me to denoise it first, just to eliminate any additional factors that are going to throw the algorithm off. Oh, and I almost forgot to talk about the color space stuff. Okay, So this is what I was mentioning before in terms of color working spaces. You want them to be consistent, right? So very commonly, if you're working in After Effects for broadcast or whatever your project is being built for, you have all these various working spaces. So you can see I'm working in Rec 709 Gamma 24. All right. Now, typically I'll have this on none, or sometimes I leave this in sRGB to follow what the default Photoshop working space is, okay? Now, you're not always going to encounter this, but particularly if you're going to be using reference frames, and I've seen it where sometimes it doesn't make a perceivable difference, but if you are creating reference frame and when you bring it back into After Effects, or even worse, you fill it, and instead of having smooth edges, it actually looks like something that has way more contrast, or is just, it looks completely off, like it just completely failed. It could very likely be that your workspaces are mismatched. So something to keep in mind. So in the case of this here, again, up in Photoshop, and I've got these assigned together so that they're working the same, you can see that I'm using Rec 709 Gamma 24. Again, the default for Photoshop is this one here, sRGB. So, if you run into an issue like that where the reference frame, once delivered back to After Effects, there's something completely off, and you wouldn't even notice it on the still frame initially. You'd notice it after it did the fill, because that filled area is likely to be darker or lighter, some gamma shift, possibly because of this, okay? And this was actually brought up from a customer, and sure enough, I verified it. It's like, oh yeah, that can happen. So that's a good little thing to keep in mind if you're going to be using reference frames. And that, my friends, is a brief but super exciting look at the new content-aware fill for After Effects, available in the latest version. You can download it right now. If you haven't already updated, please go ahead and do that. So let's just very briefly bounce over to the chat. Let's see if we've got anything in here. All right. Let's see, we've got a lot of people. Here, let's chime in over here. Marianne, bold grass is best. Yes. Dana Pride, what's up? Still Waters. Cesar. All right. GoCon, let's see. All right, no questions over there. Anwar, how are you? All right. Yes, so someone was saying it's very hard to remove objects from ocean backgrounds. That is very true. Interestingly, I was going to show you an example of that today that also didn't quite work. In fact, you know what? Here, while I'm talking, let me see if I can find my example. So here is why ocean backgrounds, hold on one second. Ocean backgrounds don't work. So the reason for that is because while content-aware fill understands the idea about, again, sampling pixels before and after, when you have something like currents, right? So, the ocean current, right? It doesn't know that, yes, in this section, the current is moving like this, but the pixels around me, could be moving in a slightly different direction or a slightly different speed. I don't know necessarily where it's going to pull those pixels from. So this is why you will typically, trying to fill something where there's moving water doesn't necessarily produce the greatest result. Now, having said that, I haven't tried it with edge blend recently, and that's definitely something worth looking into because it could surprise you there. But hold on, give me 1 second. I just want to see if I can find some of my other examples here. And let me see, because I've got some horses and bicycles. Let's see. Horses. I have so many horses. These are all things that I did prior to Adobe Max. Okay, hold on. I'm just going to open this and see if this has it. This doesn't have it. Okay, hold on. Open another one here. All right. All right, let's see. Got goats, got horses. No, these all worked fine. Okay, I may not be able to find this. Sorry about that. I was hopeful that I might be able to, but I'm not seeing them here. Too bad. Could have been great. Wild horse in pasture. Hold on, let me see. I did so many fills, so many things. Oh, here. All right, I'll just show you this because this is cool, and this is also a great example of object removal with a really, really rough but manually tracked mask. So, horse in a field, right? Camera moving alongside, right? Lots of, you know, floppy tail and other stuff. And if you look at that mask, I mean, in fact, here, wait, let me I mean, you can really see how I had to, the tracker just couldn't handle this. It was all over the place. So, and you can see this is not a good masking job. That is like the roughest, most awkward looking mask ever. But here was the final. Like, it's just sick. You would just never know. Honestly, I don't honestly even know how that worked so well because that mask was so bad. You know, even if you just stop on a frame, like, what? There's absolutely there's no edge. Even look, I love this. There's like some shallow depth of field right here, right? So this must have been like a little ridge on the wherever they were driving, following this horse. There's the in focus part of the camera. There again, it's slightly more blurry. It just preserved all of that. It's like super, super cool. Here, one more. Let me see one more time. Let me see if I can just find. I know I have these. Where could they be? CF tests older. Ah ha ha ha! Here we go. No, this looks like the same thing. Arg, where is it? No. I'm so determined to find water. No, I don't think it's any of these. All right. Well, I tried. I swear there was... Ah, wait a minute. Hold on. This might be it. Let's see. No. Arg. Okay. Well, again, this is just another example. This will take too long to fill, but I wanted to show you here where you've got a really, really intense roto mask on this. Okay, so you've got your hole there. I don't have the final version of it in here. Let's see if I can find that. It's pretty crazy. Pretty crazy what this thing did. See if I can find one of these filled. Yeah. So this is just showing like first got rid of the camel, but then I had the shadow, so I had to fix the shadow. But again, not all of these things are in here, but it's pretty crazy. What's also amazing is you notice, oh, in this one, so there's that other camel behind it, right? So I even did a pass where I fixed that camel too, but all right, I can't find all these things right now. I'll try and find the water example another time. Sorry that it's escaping me right now, but in any case, I think I kind of answered your question there, which is yes, water is a challenge. Not to say that it can't work, and if I could find the example I'm looking for, I could show you, but it's just not here. It's just not here. If you remember, this was originally Project Cloak. This was something that we sneaked at Max a little over 18 months ago, and no, okay, yeah, it's just not here. Okay, too bad. All right, enough of that. Okay, see if there's any more comments here. Okay. Okay, let's see. Looking. Rui Carapina, what's my computer configuration? So this is an iMac 5K 2018. 64 gigs of RAM, 2 terabyte SSD internal, 8 gigs video RAM with the, I don't remember, it's a Radeon, right? Radeon 580. All right. All right. Nice. Add motion blur to the fill. Yep, Joey, that's another cool thing you can do there. All right. Like to see you get rid of people. Ah, yes, absolutely. All right. Let's see. Chris Pendy, can't wait to use it to clean up some stock footage. Yes, I've already done this. So there's 1 or 2 pieces of footage that I just uploaded to stock last week. Hasn't been approved yet. Where I did just that. Some beautiful landscape shots, and there were some elements in there that just bothered me. People walking, tracked, done, gone, perfect. And it was proper like 4K content, so it looks way better. Roland Collenberg, doesn't CAF create only still images for its fills? Well, yes, it's creating a ping sequence. So it's doing what you would have done manually before, creating a frame sequence, painting them out in Photoshop, and then reassembling the frame sequence. That's what the fill is. It's a frame sequence stitched together. Yeah. All right. Okay, let's see if there's anything else. Okay. Yeah, so Austin Lawrence. So surface versus edge blend. Surface, if you're trying to remove something that, like, again, picture on a wall, something static on a flat area that is never moving and not revealing what's behind it, that's ideal for surface. Now, surface and edge blend, there's some overlap, right? Because you could say, well, if it's a beautifully exposed shot, no shadow, I want to mask out this painting here, and there's a camera move maybe, but again, the picture isn't moving. Sometimes edge blend can work there too. Edge blend is really most ideal though if in the case of like removing a logo or something like that, where you've got, a logo, which could be flat color like the Apple logo, or, multicolor, but on a flat colored surface. And effectively you want to remove that, but blend those. You don't want to see any kind of seam or hole, right? It's not trying to fill and replace an object per se. It's trying to just fill it in with that same flat background, because just like with the picture on the wall, we never see what's underneath it. That's really the ideal place for edge blend. If you A/B the two together on like logo removal, you'll see the difference. Surface is going to give you a slightly different result, and it's not going to have that smooth, seamless, edged kind of blend that edge blend method will. All right. And yes, I see Michelle Galena saying, yep, content-aware fill works great on facial blemishes, just like content-aware fill on stills. The only difference is if you've got lots of them, which today I've got a couple here, you have to track each one of those, right? So if you've got 6 blemishes, you got to track each 6 of those, which is easy if it's a little, zit or something, right? Whatever it is. But they each have to be tracked. You have to create a mask for each of those, okay? Yeah. Yeah, so again, Roland, where there's moving clouds, it tends to do a pretty decent job with, actually. But you can run into the same issue where speed and direction can sometimes, it can just make the fill look fake. That's the problem. So in that case, that's where you may have to look for alternate methods, either a sky replacement or just try some other different method of the fill, maybe if it's possible to use like a roto mask in that particular case, all right? Okay. Replace one face with another with the reference image option. Well, I mean, theoretically you could, sure, why not? Okay. All right, well, that looks like all the questions we've got here. Let's look over at Facebook. God, I can't keep these all straight. Okay. All right. Pedro, again, so, just like content aware on images, it's not always going to work, right? There are some things it's not going to be ideal for. Some things it might work great for. You just have to try, you know. If it doesn't, then you can always go old school and do frame by frame and paint, clone, stamp, whatever you have to do in Photoshop, and then recreate the frame sequence. But it's no different with imagery. You know, some images, you try and remove something, it just doesn't work. That's how it is, you know. But you've got a lot of flexibility now with how you can tweak it to really try and get a better result. And if not, you can always, again, use the sort of classic method there. What's up, F. Smitic? Computer Schmuter. All right. Cool. Okay. Oh, CT, how are you? Nice to see you. Pat1246. I do not know when Photoshop for the iPad will be coming. So, still, if you can always watch that Max preview, but we have not announced a release date for that yet. Okay. All right. Well, that is it for today, my friends. So again, thank you so much for tuning in. You'll be able to watch the replays on Twitter, Periscope, Facebook, as well as on YouTube. Thank you so much for joining and commenting. Tomorrow, we'll be back on the Premiere Pro page. And what are we covering tomorrow? These are all, again, back from NAB deep dive streams. And tomorrow, we are on Premiere Pro talking about, yes, some deep dives into the audition features. Punch and roll for ADR, dialogue replacement, auto ducking for ambience, and then one other little hidden gem that kind of plays into both of those, auto speech align. So if you're doing ADR, and if you've done your punching and rolling to replace your dialogue, how you can automatically in Audition synchronize your new dialogue with the old one, literally in about 2 clicks. So super cool. You want to check that out. Noon Pacific time tomorrow on the Premiere Pro Facebook page, as well as on Twitter, Periscope, and YouTube. Until then, have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world, and we'll see you again next time. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Take care.